Good day, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Check the Map. I'm Tyler Bannister, joined by Nick Wages and Kirsten Crum of SRG Financial Advisors. We've had a couple more weeks go by since our last recording. Multiple headlines and interesting market activity throughout that time. And as of the day of our recording today, the July CPI inflation report came out. So we'll dive into that in a few minutes. But when we're looking at the last couple weeks in the market, so January, July, one of those J months, July 25th through Friday, August 8th, it was kind of an interesting couple weeks. Certainly some volatility. Bonds, U.S. aggregate bond index was slightly positive over those couple weeks, about 0.75%. We saw real estate drop a little over 3%. Gold Gold and Nasdaq 100. We saw gold and tech really have the best couple weeks there. Nasdaq 100 was up almost 1.5%. Gold was up 1.84%. So again, you have something that's historically a safe haven, where you run to when it's risk off for stocks and equities. Gold going up about the same as the tech sector of the U.S. market. The rest of the indices had a rough couple weeks. So the Dow was down a little over 1.6%. We had small cap US stocks down about 1.9%. And then the S&P 500 was essentially flat. It was up 0.04%. So we saw a lot of things lagging. And the reason the S&P 500 was flat versus down a little bit like the Dow was essentially the mega large cap tech focused companies that are comprise a pretty good percentage of the S&P 500. So it kept it at about a break even point over those couple weeks. When you break down the US large caps between value and growth, we saw value fall back about 0.9%, and the growth side was up about 0.76%. And again, the growth side is going to once again be comprised of a lot of those tech focused companies. So interesting couple of weeks. We'll see. The inflation report came out today as we're recording, so that will have an impact, and we'll talk about some future outlooks and potential rate action as well. One thing I wanted to share real quick, we had touched on this maybe a month ago. Yeah, probably a month ago, with the one big beautiful bill and some of these brand new provisions, things we haven't seen before in the tax code. We didn't have the details explaining how this works exactly. So, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Again, both of those are just 2025 through 2028, and they have some phase out provisions. So it depends on where your modified adjusted gross income is. You may or may not be able to take advantage of those. So there's a few caveats that at the surface level we didn't see. We're going to get full guidance from the IRS by October 2nd. And so we'll have that greater detail here in a couple more months. Overtime, same kind of thing. There's a maximum annual deduction and there's a phase out period. Nick, you want to talk about the no tax on car loan interest provision?
Yeah, so this really, I mean, it sounds wonderful at first glance, and then you realize that you have to actually purchase a car after December 31st of 2024 to be eligible. So I don't necessarily think this is a reason to go buy a new car and
Well,
finance it.
one good thing with that is, because one of our questions before this guidance came out was, did you have to buy it after the big beautiful bill was signed, or was
Right.
this calendar year still going to count? So the good news is, if you meet these other 12 qualifications,
hmm
if you bought it this year, this calendar year, it could still count.
Yeah, and if you financed enough that you paid more than $10,000 in interest this year on your car, then there's probably a different conversation to be had. But you can deduct up to $10,000 in interest. Some caveats: it does have to be it had to have undergone final assembly in the U.S. It does have to be a first time use. You have to be the original owner of the car. It cannot be for a used vehicle. Um, and it has to be used for personal use, not for business. If you are in that niche and you understand that, you know, what it means to use a vehicle as business, you probably benefit more from either the mileage or actual expense deductions by claiming your expenses for using it as a business vehicle more so than paying interest on it. But if you are in a situation where you do need to buy a car or you have purchased a vehicle this year, and you do meet the criteria of its final assembly here in the US, and it's your primary vehicle for personal use, then you can actually write, even if you don't itemize your deductions, you can actually write off the interest as a tax deduction that you've paid on that loan.
Yeah, and just come tax time, you have to have that VIN number handy as well. So that's
Yeah.
another one more piece of information to either
Yeah.
include if you're doing your own taxes or for your tax preparer.
Yeah, and I'll actually to piggyback on that, there are going to be probably some more stringent record keeping requirements with some of these new provisions that we're seeing in the new bill. I mentioned that because I've actually worked with a client on um, their whether or not the tips that they receive for their self-employed business that they operate are deductible as well. Like obviously, if you work for an employer and you get a certain wage rate, your tips are documented above, you know, what you receive as your normal wage. So clearly you can write off or exclude, you know, up to $25,000 of that tip income for the year from your taxes. It's a little bit different if you're self-employed, given that you're the driver of what people pay you for your business. So, you know, it seems like there could be some loopholes there for people lowering their rates substantially and then counting more of the income that they receive as tips versus normal pay. Um, but if you're, as long as you're not in a specific specialized service trade or business that they've excluded from this, even if you do operate your own business, you can, if with proper documentation, deduct up to $25,000 of the tips that you receive as a sole proprietor or somebody that's self-employed. So again, if you go that route, there's probably going to be some pretty stringent requirements. And even we're waiting until October to find out specifically what trades or occupations that they will allow that for. But as of right now, it looks like that is something that's going to be possible, whether you're an employee of a company or you're operating your own business.
Yeah, and to your point, as far as record keeping, if you guys are already working with us, then this is a great way to keep track of these items throughout the year is through your mile marker vault. And there's a tax planning folder, and then inside there, one folder for each specific year. So I have clients who do this and do it really well throughout the year. They'll just upload a photo or a scanned image of documents they know they'll need at tax time into that 2025 folder. So then come January, February, the majority of what they need is already gathered and good to go. So, but yeah, just wanted to provide some clarity. It'll be interesting. One thing here, one fine point would be if you end up refinancing an auto loan, maybe you bought a car loan in or bought a car in March of this year. Let's say let's say the Fed does cut rates at some point, and then maybe you're able to refinance to a low rate if that makes sense. What they're saying now for the guidance is if a qualifying vehicle loan, so I had to qualify initially, if it's later refinanced, interest paid on the refinanced amount is generally eligible for the deduction. So um, it, we'll see how this plays out. Record keeping will be crucial. And then again, the deduction for seniors. Sorry, I had an echo there, but the deduction for seniors again is just 2025 through 2028 as of now. So hopefully we'll get clarity closer to 2028 if we get to continue to do that because that's a huge benefit for those
Mhm.
who are over 65. So,
Yep.
well, should we talk about the recent jobs report before we dive into CPI?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we're kind of along with a narrative that we've been following for a while that if the Fed waits until there are very clear and convincing signs that we have already slowed down before they cut rates, then it may be too late at that point. There's a lot of analysts and economists that do think that we're at a point now where it's reasonable to assume a rate reduction from the Fed within, probably by September. The jobs report from July was anything short of glamorous. It increased 73,000 overall, so the headline number doesn't look terrible. But the consensus expectation was actually 104,000, so we came in well short of that. Obviously, substantially worse were revisions to prior months, down 258,000.
We can't get away from those revisions.
Yeah,
Never for the benefits. They're never the good
right.
side revision.
Yeah, so we got the benefit for over the last 2 months of seeing, better headline numbers on the jobs report. But now looking back retro, the net loss for the month, I know the headline said we gained 73,000. You factor in revisions to prior months, lost 185,000. Another measure that's actually relatively meaningful to look at, aside from the non-farm payroll report, is the civilian employment report. It includes, small business startups. It actually declined by 260,000 in July, which helped bump the unemployment rate up to 4.2%. So it's kind of interesting to look at the report and see the jobs that are coming off of it, or at least the lack of payroll growth. But the people that are working, actually their hours rose 0.3% in July. So we actually are starting to see maybe some firms here domestically lean more heavily on people that are already employed, as opposed to looking to find another body to fill a seat, and work what they've probably been customarily working over the last 5 years.
Anecdotally, I've seen that play out with some local companies here in
Yeah.
mid-Missouri where they significantly downsized in the last 8 months.
Yeah.
But their actual business hasn't slowed down, and maybe they've grown a little bit, but they're just employing far fewer people. So
Yeah, and this is household survey data, but one theory behind all of this is with the crackdown on immigration, the foreign-born employment population has dropped 1.9 million since January, whereas the native-born employment has grown 2.5 million. So there's a lot of reasons why the numbers may look the way that they do on these reports. I mean, you look at even just the DOGE initiative of cutting government spending by reducing jobs that they didn't think were necessary, and a lot of different government entities or large government affiliates. So those are obviously going to come off of the jobs report as well, and negatively affect the numbers that we see on there. But remember, we really, from the point of building a bigger pool and sustainably growing an economy, we want to lean less on government spending and government driving of the economy, and lean more on civilian employment and sustainable entrepreneurship and things that actually over time will increase GDP because they're actually creating more products and goods and jobs. And right now we're, we did see the GDP for Q2 go up by 3%, which was even better than the expectation. But as we've talked about before, that was almost exclusively due to the fact that our trade deficit was almost 140 billion in April, and now it's all the way down to 60 billion. So we've dropped 80 billion off of our trade deficit nearly, in a few months, which has been the largest driver for going from negative GDP, where your net imports negatively bring down your gross domestic product, because that was not produced here. It was purchased here, and brought in. So that, with that being the largest driver of the Q3 GDP at 3%, we don't really see a massive contributor towards GDP of sustainable job creation, and all of these reports are really starting to kind of fit the same narrative.
Yeah, we're not necessarily to the point of the mass firing. We're starting to see the softness come in. Like you mentioned, the employees that are already existing, they're just working a little bit more, but rather than hiring people, not quite firing them all, but I'm looking at even the business services started to tighten a little bit, showing just a little bit more of, we're not necessarily letting go of everyone, but the people that we're having, they're doing maybe the work of in previous years we would have hired someone else for.
Yeah.
One narrative that has continued resiliently over the last, several years without fail, no matter what else has been going on, is our ability to spend more money. I mean, our personal spending and consumption was up 4.7%, which is technically in line with personal income as well. They're both up 4.7% year over year. One of the issues with those numbers, though, is that our spending isn't necessarily affected by government payments. That personal income figure is heavily impacted by government payments because of the Social Security Fairness Act and how much government pay. Like the report for June was personal income up 0.3%. The private sector wages and salaries rose 0.1%. The almost the key driver of that figure for June was the fact that more people are getting their retro pay for the Social Security Fairness Act implementation, and are also seeing their payments increase on Social Security from the increased benefit from the windfall elimination provision and government pension offsets going away. So we are spending as well as we ever have, which actually probably is a good segue into the inflation report, where we can see why we spend the money that we do and how inflation is kind of impacting American households on a regular basis right now.
Hey, Kirsten, did you have that graphic you
Yep.
wanted to pull up?
Yeah, let me go ahead and pull it up.
A happy CPI release day.
Yeah, look at that. We get fresh data the day of.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Can we see this? All right. So here is the CPI report, up 0.2% seasonally adjusted for July. And that's coming off of 0.3% off of June. So that brings us over the past 12 months, all items increased 2.7% before any seasonal adjustment. I like this graph that broke down some of the sections. Breakdown for July 2025 altogether. Still eggs over the past year. Coffee, I don't know, are coffee drinkers like myself? Maybe I'm feeling that. I paid $9 for a latte this weekend. Ridiculous. I can't do that to myself again. Beef, we were talking about how ground beef, I mean, these are the things that, your typical household is, you got to go out to eat. Even if we're going to the grocery store, you're getting eggs, you're getting beef. These used to be the just kind of basis of a classic dinner, making a meal at home. All of these things continuing to go up
I mean,
more.
the 1990s staple of hamburger helper, right? It was
Right.
it was a box and a pound of ground beef got you a whole dinner, and it was an affordable option. And now, up
Yeah.
11.5% year over year. That's not quite as affordable.
Wow. No. And like you said, we're not seeing um, those numbers for our income isn't necessarily going up. And most importantly, and I don't know if it's even on this one, but shelter is one of the hugest ones that we're having continue to go up. And so it's hard when you pair that with how much just your basic food items are, as well as shelter continuing to rise. It's hard to just get by with your basic expenses.
And obviously, we're back to school time, right? So college students are moving back to campus or into their apartments, and I don't know how many students are buying textbooks at this point.
No,
Uh,
they were already expensive. I don't want to know how
they
much
to
to
put that
even
in
go.
context, in the fall of 2003, for the first semester, I spent $900 on books for one semester 22 years ago. And that 13% increase on college textbooks is just from last summer to this summer of 2024 to 2025. So we know college is crazy expensive. We know that's a huge problem in our country right now with the affordability and then student loans being the only option. So to see college textbook go up another 13% at this time is pretty wild. I'm glad that I'm a few years away from considering paying for those for kids. I don't know, it's going to get better. But I I think it's interesting here. They show energy as a whole down 1.6%,
Yeah.
but I'm glad that they actually this graphic has this way because if you're looking at your utility bills for your natural gas or your electric service, um, you're seeing these 5.5%, 13.8% increases. And I don't know about you guys, but I haven't seen a local utility company or
Yeah.
municipality not send out a letter in the last 3 months saying we're raising rates or we're trying to raise rates. So the things that we are paying for on a consistent basis, motor vehicle repair, 11%, up 11%, right? So just trying to, you don't, car prices are crazy, whether it's new or used, they're still really high. Auto loan rates have gone up. So if you're wanting to keep and maintain your existing vehicle, that's considerably more expensive. So yeah, we can say headline inflation number is 2.7. And there's some bright spots. You can look at the food at home and overall, now meat's a different, especially beef is a different consideration, but overall food at home wasn't up year over year in a terrible manner, right? So it was up 2%, 2.2
2.2%. Yeah.
2.2% last month to this month, down 0.1%. Um,
Wow.
so we can say that, as of right now, we're not seeing a negative impact from tariffs on the food at home prices, right? There's other, the beef thing is the screw worms, whatever the screw tape worms, whatever they're called. Maybe I'm saying a C.S. Lewis book title instead of the actual worm name. But
Screw
we're
tape
we're
letters.
seeing yeah, screw tape letters. But we're seeing some impacts to the beef supply, driving those up specifically. But as a whole, food at home is up less than overall inflation over the last year. Um, so that's a positive thing at least. Like people were anticipating your grocery bill is going to more than double from Liberation Day in March to now, and that hasn't quite happened. So that's a positive thing. But when you're looking at like Nick had mentioned, um, looking at the civilian payrolls, and hopefully we see entrepreneurship and small businesses and more job creation. But the service side of our economy, the service sector, which is a huge part of it, right? We're a
Yep.
consumer and service economy. That's really sticky from an inflationary standpoint. It's still up 3.6% year over year.
Mhm.
So we haven't got within striking distance of that 2% or less number for a while.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting real comfortable with that 2.5 to 3.5 range overall, but there's some tough items and shelter being Pearson, like you said, that's a very, very problematic one across the board.
Yeah. And not to get on a soapbox, but that like just like with the energy section where you see negative 1.6, but then you look at the actual components that affect our lives on a regular basis with electricity and gas service and utilities going up. If you look at the food at home, this is maybe the most concerning part for me from the food at home statistics, with it being, a number of 0 for July. You're thinking like, oh yeah, we're in pretty good shape on food inflation, especially food that we're bringing home. Well, let's look into the report and see that the components of that report that are going down and helping the inflation. Okay, there you go. You've got it. Basically, everything that is ultra processed and mass manufactured with high levels of corn flour, high fructose corn syrup, cereal down 0.1, flour and prepared flour mixes down 0.9, breakfast cereal 0.7, rice, pasta cornmeal down 0.6. Breads are down, cakes, cupcakes, and cookies, fresh sweet rolls, coffee cakes, and donuts are down 1.8%. So what's becoming more and more affordable on the inflation front are things that probably are not like sustainable to a healthy, balanced diet. When you go down further on the report and you look at meat, poultry, fish, and eggs, those continue to go up. Meat, poultry, and fish up 0.7%. Pretty like significant increases when you're looking at just 1 month of data, right? But that's not necessarily a trend that I think we want to follow, where the stuff that becomes more and more affordable in the grocery store is the stuff that's mass manufactured, ultra processed, and not nearly as good for us.
Yeah, Kirsten,
And
can you
just the
scroll
quality going down. Yeah.
Yeah.
scroll back up just a page right above it? Just right up.
Mhm.
Yeah. There it is. Yeah, pause right there. Because what happens, right, is we all have to make this decision, right? We have to support and feed our families. We have to put food on the table. How do we do that with all the other costs in life? And
Mhm.
so the easy thing is to gravitate towards the more affordable options,
Mhm.
which Nick, as you pointed out, are the ones that are full of junk and garbage and poison, essentially.
Mhm.
And if you look down on the page Kirsten has pulled up, you see medical care services up a pretty large percentage month over month. And if you look at the um, on an annualized basis there, right? We have hospital services up 5.8% year over year, right in the middle. You have physician services up 3.1, overall medical services 4.3. The bottom line is a year ago, if I said, do you think that medical physician hospital expenses are affordable? A year ago, you'd say, no, it's things are way overpriced, way too expensive. We have some areas that really need to be addressed in our healthcare system in one way, shape, or form. And then on top of it, it's up another 4, 5, 6% from that point. So the trying to save money on food is going to drive us to need more of those medical
Mhm.
services and costs. So it's even on even things that are more of this lifestyle decision, they have financial impacts, and we have to think beyond the immediate moment. How can
Yeah.
I enjoy life and save on healthcare later if I can make some better food choices now? So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we even see like initiatives right now with um like within I'll just say Washington. Within Washington, maybe trying to force out some of the subsidizing of mass manufacturing food that isn't helpful for us, that is leading to higher medical expenses and much higher chronic illness rates, especially among different demographics and communities throughout the country, and maybe trying to see us go towards something where we have a more sustainable and healthy food supply that also doesn't break the bank, and we can afford to pay for the other things baked into this inflation report as well.
yeah. So yeah, from a market perspective, that generally speaking, investors are looking more at the top line number, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to see a very, and I'm not even saying misplaced, but hopeful responses to this inflation report because it is down a little bit from last month. It's far, far better than it was 2, 3 years ago. So to even be back in striking distance of 2% and under three overall, that's great, right? That's a really good thing. Um,
Mhm.
and it this will further spur on the potential rate cut decisions, which could, if they do get cut, in some ways, would provide a little bit of relief across parts of the economy, at least at the household level. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But uh, again, some positive things, some things that are going to continue to be challenging, especially when it comes to housing, shelter, rents, home
Mhm.
purchases. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see that the Fed futures was now predicting a 94% potential for a rate cut coming up in September after the release of this report. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Two,
maybe by
two
the end of the year we get rate cuts like last year. I don't know how many we were quoted for this year, but
I would say the dissenting of two Fed governors, and then the early termination of one, early
resignation.
resignation of one, probably lends itself to that, us leaning toward the direction of rate cuts in
yeah,
September.
yeah. Awesome. Anything else we want to add before I go into what's happening in the next few weeks?
Now let's take a look at what's on the horizon on the heels of this inflation.
Yep. All right. So today we're recording this on the 12th. So we got our CPI report this morning already. I'm sure we'll probably continue to see more headlines based on inflation reports coming in the future. Thursday, we have PPI, so our Producers Price Index, as well as our weekly jobless claims. Retail sales come out on Friday, see how much we are still spending and how much we are giving to those retail businesses. Next Tuesday, we have housing starts and permits, seeing how sticky this housing problem that we have is as far as how much it costs, because it really comes down to how many of those houses are being built, especially those smaller or those starter family homes that we're not seeing being built. Next Wednesday, FOMC minutes. We'll get a little bit more information from Powell, and as far as what he has comments on the CPI report, I'm sure this will have something to mention about rate cuts coming in the future, or if he's just going to tell us he needs more data. 21st, existing home sales as well, looking into those home sales report, and then we'll be talking back this next week, right ahead of GDP and more home sale reports coming up at the end of this month.
Yeah, so our next check the map, we'll definitely talk about housing. That will be,
Yep.
and from Powell's standpoint, I bet he was hoping, and this is completely speculation, I bet he was hoping there was a lot more clarity on trade deal and tariffs at this point, and that can just keeps getting
Good
kicked
point.
down the road. It just keeps getting kicked down, and especially with China. So if he was trying to wait that out, it's gonna get a little tougher as far as him making that decision at this point. So. Well, as always, thank you for taking the time to join us on this edition of Check the Map. If you guys have questions, if your loved ones and people important to you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can get to us through our website, srgfinancialadvisors.com, or give us a call at 573-302-7212. We appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.